Alcohol. Wine, beer, whiskey. Which one is the greenest? Now, I expect you choose your favorite alcoholic drink based upon flavor rather than upon environmental considerations, but just for fun, let's find out the answer. Now, each of these is one standard drink, 10 milliliters of alcohol. And that's why you can see there's more beer than wine and less of the whiskey. Now, also, this data I'm going to show you is from Britain. They don't have much of a local wine industry, so the wine was assumed to have come from a faraway country and been imported, whereas the whiskey and the beer was produced locally. And that's going to make the impacts that I show you for the wine being a little bit worse. Acidification, the creation of acid rain. The worst is the wine. Why? Because this wine had to be imported to Britain, and so the transportation costs are the major cause for the extra acid rain. Human toxicity, and here I'm not talking about the toxicity of the drink. Alcohol is technically toxic, but no, I'm talking about the toxicity, the release of toxic compounds during the manufacturing of the drinks, not the drink itself. And the worst is the beer, and wine is the second worst, and Scotch, none at all. Why? Because Scotch production makes lots of byproducts, which then don't have to be made by other processes. And the savings of human toxic compounds, because of that, wipes out any minor problems from the Scotch process. So in fact, it ends up being a net benefit to the environment. Ecotoxicity. Here we see that ecotoxicity is the worst for the wine and not so bad for the beer and Scotch. Why is wine so problematic? It's because of fertilizers and pesticides needed for the growing of the grapevines. Looking at eutrophication, the release of fertilizers into rivers and lakes, that is more from the beer and less so from the whiskey and the wine. Water usage. How much water does it take to make one standard drink size? The worst you can see is the wine, a huge amount of water compared to this much water for the beer and a tiny amount of water to make the whiskey. Why is it so bad for wine? It's because wine is traditionally grown in fairly dry regions, which then require a lot of irrigation. Global warming. How much carbon dioxide gets emitted into the atmosphere during the production and distribution of these alcoholic drinks? The worst one is beer manufacture, and the best is whiskey or Scotch. Why? It's all to do with the making of the glass bottle, not the drink itself. And for one glass bottle, you get one serving of beer. But for one glass bottle, you get many servings of Scotch. So per serving, Scotch takes the least amount of glass and therefore produces the smallest amount of global warming. So overall, for the three choices, we can see that Scotch or whiskey is the greenest choice, and beer and wine are roughly tied for which one is the most harmful.